Hello, you dubious creatures. I'm Edwin Evergreen, and welcome to The Forest. Today, we are talking about a band I have been borderline unhealthily obsessed with ever since I first found them way back at the start of 2021. That's right, we're talking about the Crane Wives. Again. I am so incredibly normal about this band, I swear. You have to believe me. Because for some weird reason, despite the fact that the band has a pretty solid amount of monthly listeners on Spotify, more than triple what they had when I first found them, might I add, and despite the countless covers and animatics you can find for their songs all over YouTube, they don't really seem to have much of a proper fan base for some reason. Or at the very least, almost none of the content surrounding them involves sitting down and actually talking about the band and the songs that they make. It's all mostly just centered around relating their music to other fandoms, which, don't get me wrong, has some merit to it. I originally found the band through an animatic for a fandom that I was in. No, I will not tell you what fandom it is because it is so incredibly embarrassing. I'm taking that shit to my grave. But with that said, for someone like me that is already a fan of the band and has been for a while, it kind of leaves something to be desired. I want a little more than just a cover or an animatic for a fandom that I'm not even a part of. I want some substance. So I can't guarantee I will really deliver much substance for you. But regardless, today I'm here to talk about the best band you've never heard. In other words, the Crane Wives. But I mean, if we're being real here, most of the people that clicked on this video probably only clicked on it because they are a fan of the Crane Wives and are also starved for content just like I am. So I don't know how accurate of a title that's really gonna be, but I'm still leaving it there for the sake of dramatics, okay? I have never once in my life been a personality hire, so we've gotta make this shit interesting somehow, bear with me here. But to those of you that do live up to the title though, let's real quick just go through some background information on who and what the Crane Wives are. The Crane Wives are a four-piece band from Michigan that started making and releasing indie folk music in the early 2010s. In the years since then, they've kind of experimented with their sound a little bit and shifted away from just pure folk into a bit more of folk pop, folk rock, that kind of area. It's still definitely got some roots in folk music, but it's shifted away a little bit into other genres. The band has two front women, Kate Pillsbury and Emily Petersmark. They take turns doing lead vocals, and both of them play guitar. And then we have Dan Rickabis on the drums and Ben Zito on the bass. All four of them work on lyrics for the songs. The drummer does some pretty nice backup harmonies every now and then. And I could be wrong about this last part, but I swear I saw something somewhere that the bassist Ben is also the manager for the band. I haven't fact checked that. Like I said, it could be wrong, but either way, it is a group of four very multi-talented people that have all come together to make music. And it's some pretty damn good music, if I say so myself. I feel like kind of the two main aspects of the Crane Wives that stand out to me and kind of define what they are beautiful three-part harmonies. And some well-written but devastating ass lyrics. Some of their songs I feel like can only really be classified as fighting words. Genuinely, who gave you the right to make this shit? If someone I knew IRL made me feel the same way some of the Crane Wives songs do, I think we'd actually have to start throwing hands. Genuinely, I think that is the only acceptable course of action there. Because what the actual hell, man? Which brings us to chapter 1 of the video, which I'm just going to title Why? Why write such devastating songs? And more importantly, why do I and so many other people keep coming back to them? Why do I keep crawling back to Empty Page, even though I just know it's gonna hurt my fucking feelings? Which, funnily enough, I feel like the answer lies in the question. In other words, I feel like the devastating ass lyrics are one of the big reasons behind the Crane Wives' popularity, and the reason why there are fans out there like me that have consistently had the Crane Wives in their listening rotation year after year without fail, despite the fact that they haven't really been releasing music. Yes, we got a new album at the end of 2024, but before then, we hadn't had any new music since 2020. It's been 2 years since I first found the live album, and I'm still listening to it just as obsessively as I was back in 2023, if not even more so. There's something to be said about a band that isn't afraid to touch on heavier topics without sugarcoating or watering it down at all. The Crane Wives really do not pull their punches at all. They go straight for the throat, and I've got a lot of respect for that, I'll be honest. I like the ruthlessness, especially because a lot of the topics they cover aren't very specific. So for the most part, there are things that pretty much everyone has experienced and can relate to at least a certain extent. You know, it's feeling left behind. It's dealing with past trauma. They're all just generally relatable things that most people experience at some point in their life. And obviously, for some people, it's more intense than for others. But regardless, the feelings are still there. And if you can see specks everywhere, there are so many gnats out here. I did not think this through. I stayed up all night last night so that I could catch the sunrise to have a sick backdrop for this video. I hiked 10 minutes in the dark, and then I realized I left my fucking camera battery on the charger, and I had to run back up a mountain and through a field, and by the time I came back down here, the sunrise was done and over with. So now I'm just out here, surrounded by gnats. They're in my eyes. Anyways, back to the point. And even whenever you get into the more specific songs like Never Love an Anchor or The Garden, you know, songs about experience that maybe not everyone has gone through, they're still just such well-written and mesmerizing songs that it doesn't matter whether you can personally relate to it or not. Either way, you still feel the full force of those emotions because of how well-written and poignant the lyrics are. I mean, Never Love an Anchor is widely considered one of the Crane Wives' most upsetting songs, for good reason. And in my opinion, it's also one of the least widely relatable songs they've made. Like, how many people do you think there are out there that listen to the Crane Wives and that have had to put a child up for adoption? Probably not that many, if any at all. And yet, it is one of their most listened to songs, and it very consistently just hurts people's feelings. I feel like a lot of people really try their hardest to just totally avoid any sort of negativity. Like, a lot of people, especially around where I live and grew up in the South, really just aren't taught how to deal with any sort of negative emotions, you know? You're just taught to look on the bright side, focus on what you got, not what you want. Be happy you got a roof over your head and food in your belly, boy, you'll be fine. Just all that shit. The typical spiel you hear about, like, oh, there are children starving in Africa, so your problems really aren't that bad. Suck it up. Be a man. And I mean, to a certain extent, there is some merit to be had there. You know, it is nice to be grateful for where you are and for what you have, but at the same time, ignoring anything negative doesn't magically make everything positive. You know, ignoring something doesn't make it go away, it just makes it build up. Part of growing up and not being a mess is learning how to just sit in those emotions, even if they're negative and even if they suck, and just let them be felt. Because the more you push them down, the stronger they're going to become, until eventually you can't hold it in anymore, and you find yourself blowing up after the tiniest little inconvenience, which I feel like is a big reason for why the Crane Wives have the dedicated, like, obsessive little, almost but not quite fan base that they do. Is because it gives people an outlet to feel that shit. To a certain extent, it's cathartic. Everyone needs an outlet, and for a lot of people, that's music. You know, sometimes you've just gotta crash out to a depressing ass song just to remind yourself that you're human and you have feelings, and that's normal.
It feels more like trauma dumping. I'm glad you see it as a gift. And I feel like a lot of what we're taught as people is like, you're supposed to be grateful for the good things. That's good. That's not a bad narrative to have. But I also feel like it sometimes silences this other very real part that's like, I also have pain and I also have hurt, and that is also real. Both can exist at the same time, and I'm trying to hold space for both.
Believe it or not, things are changing. I've spent most of the video so far almost making the Crane Wives out to be this, like, super obscure niche band that no one's ever heard of. But clearly, that's not true. They've got over 1 million monthly listeners on Spotify right now, which is a massive accomplishment, especially for an independent band. And over the course of the last, like, year and a half or so, I have noticed an actual, like, proper fan base kind of start to form around the band. They may not be all that active right now since the new album hype has died down, but there's actually a lot of Crane Wives fan accounts I've found on Instagram. They just keep popping up. I spent a lot of the video talking about a lack of reaction content, and believe it or not, that has also been shifting. I want to say we're sitting at a grand total of maybe like 5 Crane Wives reaction videos on YouTube at the point of me recording this, and most of those are actually pretty recent, like within the last 3 months or so. And it's getting windy. But anyways, back to the point of the video, which is things are changing. Things are shifting in a positive direction. And I genuinely could not be more happy about it. My addiction is getting fed. I'm not starving anymore. Let's go. It's also been fun looking at the shift in what songs by the Crane Wives people are talking about. A year or two ago, if you search for the Crane Wives on TikTok and you went to the tag for it, a solid 95% of the videos would just be using the chorus of The Moon Will Sing. And the other 5% would mostly just be curses and then maybe a little bit of tongues and teeth if you're lucky. And that's it. But now there's actually kind of some variety to be had there. It's crazy. I mean, when you look up Crane Wives Animatic on YouTube, one of the first results that shows up, at least for me, is an animatic using Sleeping Giants. Which, as much as I love the song, it's definitely not one I would expect to be like a common song for people to use for shit. And yet here we are. I love watching things change in real time, especially whenever it's something like this where it's changing in a positive direction. I love looking at the Crane Wives' tour announcements and seeing them venture further and further from Michigan. I love seeing that a lot of those shows are actually getting sold out. You know, they're getting at least a little bit of the attention that I feel like they deserve and that they have deserved for a very long time. You know, I feel like ever since I first properly started listening to the band, I've just been waiting for them to have their moment. And I mean, they kind of, sort of had a bit of a moment a while ago with The Moon Will Sing. You know, like I said, the chorus for that was kind of big on TikTok. But it wasn't that big, and it also wasn't very long-lived, so I don't really count that, you know. But as time has gone on, the band has started to grow. Things have started to change. They're picking up traction, especially with them releasing a new album. And I genuinely could not be happier about it. Which very awkwardly segues into chapter 3 of the video that I am simply going to title An Observation. I don't know if you can tell by looking at me or by listening to me ramble about the Crane Wives for the past probably 10 plus minutes, but I don't know, I'm not a big indie folk guy. The Crane Wives are very much the exception and not the rule whenever it comes to my particular taste in music. I'm not a chaperone girly like I'm sure a lot of you guys are. Don't get me wrong, I like Hot to Go as much as the next guy, but my heart lies in something just a little bit heavier. You know, something with just a little bit more grit to it. The reason I'm bringing this up is because me being a fan of the Crane Wives that also listens to a lot of metal music and a lot of that kind of shit, I've noticed a massive difference and almost gap between the two fan bases or communities surrounding the genres. And it's not a gap in the favor of the Crane Wives, unfortunately. It's very much against them. Spiritbox, I feel like, is a good example to get my point across here, because when I first found them, they were, I think, almost the exact same size as the Crane Wives are right now. Like I've already said multiple times already, the Crane Wives are sitting at around 1.3 million monthly listeners at the point of me recording this video. And Spiritbox has more than double, honestly almost triple that at the moment. But when I first found them, that is a big ass gust of wind, goddamn. But when I first found them, I want to say they were sitting pretty at around maybe 1.2 million. So roughly the same size as the Crane Wives are right now. And yet, for some reason, there's a massive gap between the amount of content being made about the two bands, especially if we're talking about reaction videos, which, let's get real, we are. I like reaction content, okay? Sue me. I like reaction videos. I like seeing someone else experience something for the first time because I can't do that shit again. I've already done it. I can't go back, but I can watch them go through that shit. I could go on a whole rant about reaction content, but I won't. Because when I first found Spiritbox, I feel like genuinely I could have sat there and just watched reaction videos all day long, and I still wouldn't have ran out of them. There were so many of them. It's crazy. And yet the Crane Wives only have 5. I don't get it. It's such a big disparity. And I mean, you could potentially argue that Spiritbox maybe isn't the best example to give because they have a gimmick. Don't get me wrong, they're a very, very solid band. They deserve the fame or the attention that they've got up to this point. But they do also have something working in their favor as far as reaction content in particular goes. You know, having a woman as a lead singer in a predominantly male field, and especially having a pretty woman that can do this. definitely lends well to reactions. But I mean, even with that said, I feel like the gap is so insanely large that that argument almost means nothing. You know, something as simple as having a gimmick would not cause this much of a fucking gap. There's gotta be something else going on. And the more I've thought about it in the process of scripting out this video, the more I think I might actually have an answer for once, which is that it has nothing to do with the bands themselves, and instead everything to do with the genres that they exist within. I hate to say it, but there's not really much community whenever it comes to the indie folk, like folk rock kind of genre that the Crane Wives fall into. There's fans of individual artists and subgenres, and there's a little bit of overlap here and there, but there's not really much of like an overarching community surrounding the genre as a whole. At least not from what I've seen on YouTube. Metal, on the other hand, is such a polarizing, I guess, like niche kind of genre that it's actually managed to form a very solid community on YouTube. Obviously, there's elitists, gatekeepers, and just general assholes like there is in any kind of community or genre or anything like that. But there's also a lot of almost like a sense of belonging to be had there. You know, there are a lot of channels on YouTube dedicated pretty much exclusively to metal and rock as a genre, reacting to music, talking about what's going on in the scene, talking about developments, just surrounded around the genre, you know? And indie folk doesn't really have that. I feel like because of that difference in community, even substantially smaller bands like Relica have a lot more of like a presence on YouTube than the Crane Wives do, is because they have that like solid, strong metal community there to back them up and to talk about them and to show them to new people. There's just so much more of a support system on YouTube for metal and rock bands than there is for indie folk. The difference is night and day. It's actually kind of crazy. And I mean, I hate to say it, but I don't think there's really much of a solution for closing that gap, especially because I'm part of the problem. Like I said before, I'm not a folk guy. This is not my genre. The Crane Wives are an exception, not a rule. So I'm not about to try and spearhead and create some like bustling indie folk community on YouTube, because I'm not passionate about it. I really don't give a shit. The only thing I care about is the Crane Wives, and I'm not about to make a whole YouTube channel dedicated solely to the Crane Wives. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have some other video ideas surrounding the band that I'm probably gonna, you know, delve into at some point, but that's as far as I go. Like, sorry, but I'm not your guy. I'm really not. And with that said, we've now made it to the point of the video where things go a little off the rails. I'll try my best to keep it brief, but I make no promises, okay? I've got a mission for you. I want you to go listen to at least one song by Spiritbox. I want you to go expand your horizons like I have expanded mine. If I can be as obsessed as I am with the Crane Wives despite my taste in music, I feel like there's a very solid chance that you might actually like Spiritbox if you give them a proper chance. If you don't want to stick around for the rest of the rant, I'll put some recommendations on the screen for you right now. You can just pick one at random. It doesn't matter what you choose. Like, I could talk about all this for so fucking long, but I'm trying to bite my tongue at least a little bit here, because I know there's no overlap between Spiritbox listeners and the Crane Wives listeners, with the exception of like 3 people, all of which being people that I know personally that I have introduced to both bands. And I don't even know if any of them are going to watch this fucking video. So I'm doing this for myself, and that's it. So I'll try and keep it brief. But at the same time, I also got a new Spiritbox album in the midst of me scripting and recording this video. Needless to say, I have been just a little obsessive, as I am with most things. I have been clawing at the bars of my enclosure, just wanting to fucking talk about it. So, just as a quick little closer to the video, let's draw some comparisons between Spiritbox songs and Crane Wives songs, and hopefully maybe one of them will interest you. Constance is actually a great place to start with Spiritbox. It's not very heavy, and it's also a great equivalent to Never Love an Anchor, because they are both songs that just rip your fucking heart out. Like, genuinely just a distressing song, especially if you watch the music video. Belcara, as much as I don't recommend you listen to it, is one of my favorite songs, and it's just Queen of Nothing in a black leather jacket. Ride the Wave is just a a heavier mix between metaphor and bitter medicine. It's being disingenuous and holding yourself back as a defense mechanism. You know, biting your tongue and holding things back no matter how much you want to say it. It's constantly living with that bitter taste in your mouth until finally you can't hold it in anymore. It leads to a nasty breakdown, both metaphorically in the lyrics of the song and also literally in the song structure and how it sounds. Also, yay, ship motif. I know it's not a Crane Wives reference, but I hear anyone mention a ship or an anchor or a crow or a garden, and I think of the Crane Wives now. I am so fucking brain rotted, it is insane. And Keep Sweet is a darker and infinitely more upsetting version of Pretty Little Things with a catchy ass chorus. But I guess I will end my rant there. I don't want this video to be like 30 fucking minutes long. If you made it this far, thank you, genuinely. It's probably gonna be just my sister and then Ryan at the end of the video. So Ryan, if you're watching this, hi. Thanks for making it. Thanks for sticking around. Now get your ass back to work, alright? We don't got time for this shit. And it's getting dark. I've been out here so long, the sun is setting. I'm too obsessive. I have too much shit to say. I really do. It's a problem. I need to fucking go before the sun actually sets. Bye-bye. Ugh.